We're joined now by Professor Nicholas Allen from the Department of Politics, International Relations and Philosophy at the University of London. A very good evening to you and thank you so much for speaking to us. Perhaps let's just lash on to that last bit. Britain's first Prime Minister of colour. Some thought they'd never see the day. And of course, he was very much close in the running with Liz Truss when they were vying for this position. And it's come full circle. Your personal opinion on Rishi Sunak?
Well, he's, I think, very much the anti-Truss Prime Minister. As you say, he lost the leadership contest against her back in the summer, but events conspired against Liz Truss, primarily events of her own creation, and he's really set himself up as the man to fix the mess that she made. You heard that in the speech that he gave outside Downing Street earlier today. He talked about her mistakes, and I think he is there primarily because Conservative MPs see him as the anti-Truss.
A former hedge fund manager who, by his own accord, is not doing badly at all. Personally, he's one of the wealthiest in the House. So does he have what it takes? Rishi Sunak saying that as the 57th Prime Minister of Britain, he will fix the mistakes made by his predecessors, Liz Truss. But how are they hugely divergent in their approach on the economy and how to deal with it?
Yeah, he doesn't really have much wiggle room. It's a bit of a cliche in British politics in recent years, but every Prime Minister who's come in has inherited a poison chalice. And I think Sunak certainly has inherited a poison chalice. He's got to cut spending, but that's not going to go down terribly well with voters who are still really reeling from the austerity of the Cameron years. And he's got to fill the gap in the public finances. But at the same time, the public services in the UK are deteriorating. And a lot of people are increasingly reliant on the public sector for their well-being. And of course, if schools, if education, if health service, if other as parts of public infrastructure crumble even further, voters are going to take note. So he might need to fix the hole in the public finances, but in so doing, he's almost certainly going to upset a great deal of voters. And of course, the Conservatives are so far behind in the opinion polls right now that the chances of an early election are really very, very slim.
So has he effectively been given a poison chalice? I mean, he said he's forming a new cabinet, but can a newly formed cabinet achieve continuity and stability? We've seen some, as we mentioned, Boris Johnson's loyalists opting to resign. Is that a good move for somebody who needs to shape things up while at the same time, effecting change and stability at the same time?
Yeah, he's only just putting the finishing touches to his cabinet, and right now it looks like he's undertaken a massive overhaul. I mean, there's been a real clear out of suddenly those ministers who had supported Truss in her leadership campaign. There are a lot of familiar names who've come back. Michael Gove has returned. Dominic Raab has returned. So in many ways, the cabinet looks like really much like Boris Johnson's did before he was kicked out as a result of the mass resignation. So there's a lot of continuity. I think the emphasis for the time being is going to be on economic stability and getting the confidence of the markets. But the problem is chasing the confidence of the financial markets will come at a cost, and that cost will, over time, be continued deterioration in the public services. You may have heard of the famous line that it's the economy stupid, but really elections in Britain, it's the economy and the public services stupid. And I think politically, looking ahead over the next 2 years, that's going to be the real problem and the real challenge that Sunak faces, how he reconciles the economic situation with the state of the public services.
I suppose with Jeremy Hunt staying on as finance minister, there's a continuity there, and we understand that Chancellor Dominic Raab as well he's staying, including Oliver Dowden as the Deputy Prime Minister, the kind of team that will bring about confidence from detractors and the kind of policies. I mean, you already mentioned some of the challenges, tax cuts, which greatly displeased some within the electorate. And I know when he was vying for the position, some said it will be difficult for people who are finding it difficult to make ends meet to identify, resonate with Rishi Sunak, somebody who, for instance, has a pool that is the size of somebody's, annual income. So just how is that balancing act going to be effected?
I mean, I think his own personal wealth will be sort of hinted at by the opposition parties. There'll be a lot of nudge, nudge, wink, wink about that. But I think they'll probably refrain from the very explicit personal attacks on him, not least because I think most voters in the UK, frankly, regard most Conservative ministers as being rich anyway. So in a sense, that's almost sort of part and parcel of it. His cabinet appointments, so he's made some interesting decisions, shall we say. He's brought back Suella Braverman as Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, who resigned 6 days ago for breaching the ministerial code with a security lapse. She's been brought back as Home Secretary. So what I think he's trying to do there, what he's trying to do by bringing back Dominic Raab and others, is perhaps doubling down on the Conservative Party's reputation for being slightly stricter on social issues, certainly around immigration. So I think he's going to try to maintain some of the support that the Conservatives had got in the last general election by continuing this slightly more socially conservative programme, this slightly more almost authoritarian approach, really. That will perhaps go some way to secure people who perhaps pro-Brexit and unhappy with sort of the direction of travel in cultural terms, but still he's going to find it really very, very difficult, I think, to maintain the support of a lot of voters in more deprived areas who frankly need some kind of government support. Now, it looks like he's going to try to resurrect the levelling up agenda. This was something that was very much associated with Boris Johnson. It was part of the programme that won over so many voters back in 2019. Michael Gove is back as Levelling Up Secretary, and he pointedly said in his speech outside Downing Street that the mandate that Boris Johnson had got in 2019 wasn't just Boris Johnson's, it was the Conservative Party's mandate. So I think another part of his attempt to try to retain the coalition that propelled the Conservatives to their big win in December 2019 will be to continue with, or at least try to find some way of continuing with the levelling up agenda as all the cuts are also going on at the same time.
Just in terms of the meetings that he's set up, I believe he said that he's going to speak to Nicola Sturgeon, who claims that she didn't even meet Liz Truss during her brief premiership. And I believe that there's the reappointment of Chris Heaton-Harris as the Northern Ireland Secretary. How strategic are these moves?
Partly strategic, but really absolutely necessary. One of the big backdrops to the UK politics in recent years has been the crisis facing the integrity of the United Kingdom itself. Things are not going terribly well around Northern Ireland Protocol. That was part of the deal to leave the European Union. That's led to the collapse of the power sharing government in Stormont. And I'm sure he'll be very keen to try to avoid elections there if possible, to try to find a way of reconciling that. And Nicola Sturgeon, of course, the First Minister in Scotland, she's really looking forward to having an opportunity for another independence referendum. Now, he'll have to try to placate that. If he's able to, only time will tell. But the fact that he faces, or the United Kingdom government faces these threats really to the Union itself, one in Scotland, one potentially in Northern Ireland, it's something that no Prime Minister can really turn a blind eye to, and it's something that I think Sunak is aware of. Remains to be seen what he can do, though.
So Rishi Sunak says that he will unite the country, not with words, but with action. Can you anticipate some of the moves that he's likely to make to do this?
Well, I think one of them I've already alluded to. So trying to get back on track with the levelling up agenda that Liz Truss had really abandoned as part of her slash taxes programme. So that's going to be one of them. Otherwise, I think we really need to wait and see. Sunak's been very, very quiet over the summer. He's kept a very low profile since Liz Truss became Prime Minister. And I think really it's a case of only time will tell to see what he will actually do. He's built up a ministerial team. He's doubtless now going to spend the next few weeks really trying to work out what he's going to do. At the moment, it's still a little bit of an unknown quantity.
And not to lean on stereotypes, but just I'm looking back at some of the appointments as we go along. The Honourable Kemi Badenoch, is that how you pronounce the MP's surname? She's been reappointed Secretary of State for International Trade, but she's also been appointed Minister for Women and Equality. So that is an important position in a country that still has a lot to deal with in terms of those issues. Yeah,
I mean, in the sense that Rishi Sunak has become Prime Minister is clearly it's an enormous deal for many people from the Asian community in the UK, with those with an Asian background. At the same time, he's never played on that, really. It's not part of his political persona. He's become really Prime Minister because he's seen as the safe pair of hands in terms of finance and economics. I mean, as I said earlier, he's the anti-trust character by really. The equalities position historically in Britain, it's often been assigned to a woman minister anyway. Mainly it started off as the Minister for Women, and then equalities sort of got bundled up with it. Kemi Badenoch is an interesting politician. She is a woman of colour, but she's also taken a very clear position, if you like, in what is called Britain's own culture wars. So she's someone who takes issue, I suppose, with what some people call like the woke agenda. So by giving her the equalities portfolio, it's a way really of also signalling that whilst the Conservative government takes minority issues very seriously, it also takes them seriously on their own terms. So in that sense, I suppose, it also plays into the narrative that the government is trying to frame, which is that essentially Britain has done a pretty good job in terms of race relations, and the Conservative Party in particular has really, in its sort of more ostensibly self-proclaimed more meritocratic approach, has done a very good job also of incorporating minorities into its elected ranks.
Thank you so much for your time and insights, Professor Nicholas Allen. Much appreciated, University of London. And he shares with us his views on the new Prime Minister of Britain's, Rishi Sunak's cabinet, and the agenda ahead of him.